More and more Californians are moving to Iowa, and I've fortunately had the opportunity to work with a lot of them moving here. But why are they doing it? Well, this is just a few of the reasons they have given me as to why they made the big move. Now let's clear the air and talk about our first one, and that really comes down to politics. And not only the politics, but the policies behind the politicians and what they are doing in the state of California. So obviously California is a very blue state, and Iowa, as it currently stands, is a fairly red state. Now, Iowa hasn't always been that way. It's kind of been in between, but as of recently, definitely has been a red state, and the people that are moving here really identify with becoming a Republican or more of a red state type of person. They have seen the policies in work in California, and they just can't stand it. There's a lot to unpack with this, and I'm not going to go into policies and into the nitty-gritty of that, but just know that politics is definitely one of, if not the number one reason people are starting to make the big move here to Iowa. Now, putting politics off to the side, what is some other things that people are stating as to why they've decided to make the big move to Iowa? Well, one of the major things that I hear a lot and I get questions on all the time is the homelessness. Now, homelessness is definitely an issue in the state of California. You see it on the news. I hear it from the people that are moving here. So obviously there is a correlation there. That being said, it doesn't mean that Iowa is completely immune to homelessness. Obviously we have homeless people here, and as much as we'd like it not to be that way, we still do have to deal with it. But what does it actually look like as far as the homelessness goes? Well, if you look at the numbers, we've actually had a decrease in homelessness to about 8.6% since 2020, and if you go all the way back to 2010, it's nearly 20% reduction in the amount of homelessness here in the state of Iowa. What does that actually mean as far as the amount of people? Well, the amount of people really, if you look it up online, is about 2,400 people in the state of Iowa that are homeless, which if you look at it on that terms, that's really not a lot considering there's about 3 million people that live in the state. So definitely one of the bigger reasons why Californians are moving to the state, because they are tired of dealing with that issue there and want to come here where we don't have that big of issue in comparison. Now, I've lived in the state of Iowa my whole life, so I take a lot of these things for granted, and I do know the entire state, and that's why people give me a call. They want to know what it's like to live here. So if you have questions about what it's like to live here or any details, my number is popping up down below. I'd love to help you out. But what is the third reason that people are stating why they're coming here? Well, that reason actually is considered in pollution. Now, I hear it all the time from my client from California that the state of California is getting polluted, littered, and they're just tired of having to deal with that problem as well. So here in the state of Iowa, it's not, again, like we have no pollution. We do have littering, but it's fairly low. A lot of people here in the state really want to take care of their community. So you'll see people walking around with buckets and bags and picking it up. In fact, there's an Adopt a Highway program that you'll see people actually volunteer to go out on the highways and pick up trash along the highways in order to keep our state as clean as possible. But beyond the trash, what other things can happen? Well, obviously, air quality is a huge deal. And beyond the occasional smoke coming down from Canada, our air quality tends to be fairly good. When you think about it from a people perspective, there's not a ton of people that live here, only about 3 million in the entire state. So you're not going to get all that smog from the cars, from the trucks, everything that goes along with that. So air quality tends to be pretty good. And you do get the occasional pig smell, but I'd rather take that smell over some of the smog and bad air quality in some of these cities in California. Another huge one that people state as reasons they want to move to the state of Iowa versus staying in California is the crime. Now, I can't talk about very specific things with crime, as in real estate we do have to be careful because of fair housing laws, but what I can say is that in the state of Iowa, we're looking at about 3 crimes per 1,000 people in the state of Iowa, which obviously we still have crimes here. The majority of those crimes are assault in the violent category, but overall, fairly safe state. And in California, you're looking at about 4.4 crimes per 1,000 people, but some of these cities are much, much higher. The highest crime city there sits at about 11 crimes per 1,000 people, and all of that is violent crime. So people are frustrated with that. They want to get away from that, and that's another reason that Iowa is appealing to them, because the crime rates are lower on average in the state of Iowa. Now, I've talked about this before, but it is something else that people bring up to me when they're moving to the state, and that is the cost of living, specifically around the housing costs. So the average house in the state of Iowa is going to be around $240,000, which to us native Iowans actually seems pretty high, considering just a couple years ago the average price point was about $170,000. So it's a pretty big jump for us, but for people coming from California, that is nothing. The average price in California is around $750,000, which is a huge jump in comparison to the average cost of a house in the state of Iowa. And people want to be able to afford a house, so they have to go to the places that it is still affordable, and the state of Iowa is and happens to be one of those places. But not only that, our cost of living overall is fairly affordable as well. Our groceries are below the national average. Gasoline is below the national average. Most of those day-to-day items, they're just below the national average, and we love it here because of that reason. And a lot of Californians are seeing that as a huge benefit as well. So they're deciding to make that move and come right over here to the state of Iowa. Now, you may note behind me, there's not a lot of people around me, and you'll get that quite often here in the state. The state of Iowa only has about 3 million people, where California is a ton more people. So the state of Iowa is really appealing to the people from California that want to get away and sitting elbow to elbow next to their neighbors, and it's a huge benefit. You know, Iowa is consisted of a ton of small towns, and you can have a community there because everybody knows everybody. It can be detrimental, don't get me wrong. If you don't want people knowing your business, Iowa probably is not the place you want to be, because everybody does know everybody. But if you want to get away from these big cities, Iowa might be a great option. Even if you still want to live in a city, we have them, but they're not that big. Where Des Moines Metro is actually our largest, at sitting at about 700,000, which in comparison really isn't that much. Now, every place has its own natural disasters, and California and Iowa are no exceptions. But again, this is one reason that people have decided to make the move to Iowa, because as of lately, California seems to be having a lot of natural disasters. They have the drought that they had. Now it's flooding. They have earthquakes. All of these are major items when it comes to the natural elements of the state. Now, nobody can really control that, but it is a fact that people are seeing in the state. Now, Iowa is not immune to all of this. We had drought this year. We've had flooding in the last couple of years. We've had tornadoes. But the thing is they're not all the time, especially tornadoes. I've been in the state for 30 years, and I have never actually physically seen a tornado. Not that I haven't been affected by it. I actually helped clean up after one after it hit a small town close to my hometown, but it's not a super common occurrence. And it's a big benefit for some people that are wanting to get away from those wildfires, the flooding, the droughts, the whatever else it is in California. Again, this is not something that people can control, but it is an option and a reason why people decide to make the move over here to the state of Iowa. And unemployment is another big reason that people try to make the move over here to the state of Iowa. We have fairly low unemployment here. If you want a job, you usually can find something, and they're fairly good paying jobs, especially if you consider the cost of living, which I touched on earlier. So that's just another small reason that people decide to make that move here to the state of Iowa. But here's the thing, I get to help people move here all the time, and I'd love to hear your story. If you're deciding to make that move from California or anywhere in the States, let me know. My number is popping up below. I'd love to answer any questions that you might have. But for now, check out this video about the state of Iowa that you may like.